Okay, welcome to our third class meeting. We'll continue with Beowulf, and we're getting kind of like into the story now, what is going to be happening, and we'll see how far we get. But first of all, here is the helmet from about the year 500. Of course, Beowulf is not a historical person. The other people in the Beowulf poem are historical persons, and they can be found in historical records. Like Rodkar was really a king of the Danes, and this is fictionalized. The Grendel that they are talking about is a metaphor for bad things that happen in the world. We could say that the virus today is some kind of a Grendel, right, that people are trying to win. So anyway, this is the original helmet going back to about 700, and obviously not Beowulf's helmet, but this is something that he might have worn. And here, the next picture here is the helmet reproduction of that original helmet, and they are both kept in the British Museum in London. So if you ever go there, if we ever can travel again, so there's an idea, go and see the helmet that is often just referred to as Beowulf's helmet, but it's not, because Beowulf wasn't a real warrior. But you can see how they sometimes describe how their helmets, they have these boar face or whatever. So it was a pretty scary look that you see. But then on the other hand, military garb always looks a little bit scary, doesn't it? Even here on campus, when you see the students who are part of the ROTC, you can look at them that this is they are in their camouflage outfits with the boots and all the gear on, and it's very, very impressive, isn't it? There is something impressive in the military gear, and again, when this person comes to fight you, like he did come to fight Grendel. Grendel might have been a little bit impressed, even though in the beginning he wasn't. But anyway, the military gear is sometimes meant to also intimidate. So it's part of the ethos of this is I am the tough guy. Okay, last time I gave this to the class, and I'm going to be posting it there, so I believe I have copies of it here as well. If anyone wants to get a copy, let's see where it is. No, I left them in my office, so you can get it from here. What I wanted to, can you see that at all? So that these names are quite impressive too, and as you can see, we talked a little bit about what these names mean. Sometimes they have unclear meanings, but they are translatable. Most of them are translatable from Old English. So let's read these names so that they don't sound quite as foreign to us. They are foreign. They are Old English, and that is a foreign language to us, even though it's very closely related to the variety we are speaking today. And we have gotten our language from Old English just through linguistic changes. So Beowulf, just repeat after.
Beowulf.
Beowulf. Okay, that was easy. But then we get to Rodkar. Rodkar. So that was a wrath spear or glorious spear, where wrath is the basis for our term wrath. and it could mean in Old English either wrath or anger or glory. So Hrothgar. And who was Hrothgar? He was the king of the Danes, indeed. Yes. The one thing that we kind of like gets our attention is the initial consonant cluster there in the beginning, HR, and that was actually pronounced Hrothgar. Okay, then we have Heorot, good, and Heed. Then we have Hrothgar's, the king of Danes, his wife, whose name was foreign slave or foreign captive, and that was Wealhtheow. Then we have Freyawaru, their daughter Freyawaru. If you don't mind saying after me, Freyawaru. It's easier to read when you know how this sounds. At the end of today's readings, we get to Unferth. Yes, unhardy. He was the thug. Not so good necessarily. Then we have Beowulf, Ashere, Eormenrich. Yes, rich means ruler. We get our word rich, like somebody has money. So that comes from ruler or the kingdom that they ruled. It meant both. Riche actually meant kingdom. So Eormenrich, Hretrich, Edgetheow, servant of the sword, edge and servant, sword's edge and servant. Old English was full of these compound words, which we have much fewer. I mean, we talk about school buses and footballs, those are compound words, but Old English was so rich with them. Erdgils, Breka, Hrothmund, Swerting. That was a name of a sword. Hildeburh, Hrothulf. So here the morpheme is ulf, which means wolf. So it's sometimes wolf or ulf. So that's glorious or angry wolf. And Ohtere, Sigemund. Okay, just a small example of names that keep being repeated in the poem, and now you know how to pronounce them. This is the first page, the first lines. We read that last, and I posted it on in that Beowulf folder, where you can click on the little microphone and you can hear me read it, and you can practice it if you want to. Now, this is not the original manuscript. The original manuscript, it burnt down. This is a later transcription of it, which is clearer. But to us, of course, we have to learn how to read it. But if you look at it with knowing what words you're supposed to be looking for there, so you will find what. Remember, that was the interjection, like hello or so or yay, nice to see you. So what the garde na in Yerdahum. So you can kind of like try to match this if you want to, and then that was God. König is, let's see. Forsköp funden över Profreie Bad, Werk unter Volknum, Ottat him Eichwolch, Tara sitten Ra, Kombanjulen. There, that's what I was looking for. That is abbreviated, so it's just this mark. So even without knowing these conventions, it's kind of difficult. That was God König. That sounds very much like present day English. But anyway, so I just wanted you to see that this is a transcript of the original manuscript, or the existing manuscript. We don't know whether it was necessarily original, but it's still kind of, hard work to read it. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, there are very few jobs nowadays because Old English is kind of like not the thing to do, but this is fascinating. So if you want to do manuscript study, this just gives an idea of it. And here is the burned page that I gave you handouts of this. So this brings us to, and we already started talking about the place Heorot Hall. Heorot meaning heart, not heart, the organ, but heart, male buck deer. And this is not the place, this is just an artist's rendition of how it could have looked like. And so the point is that it's very, very impressive because it was like world famous according to the poem, a world famous place, and this is how it may have looked like. This is how the insides of Heorot Hall might have looked like. A huge place, because in today's reading you probably got into the place where after Beowulf has killed Grendel and they have this huge celebration for him, the king Rodkar sends him a gift, several gifts, but one of the gifts is 8 horses. Right? So he brings the 8 horses right there into Heorot Hall. So it's kind of like, very big kind of point there made by that particular gift being presented inside. This is probably something that it may have looked like, and they have done, in Denmark, they have done these excavations and been able to figure out where actually, because this is a real Danish king, and Heorot Hall was there at one point, and they have done excavations and found, have been able to kind of like identify the place, and that's one of my big what is that, bucket list items is that I want to go there and see that place. But this is something that it may have looked like, and it gives an idea if you just compare it to the size of the horses there in the front. 8 of them would have easily fit inside, and that was how they built buildings at that time. Here's the place in Scandinavia. We have Sweden here, and what is not shown is, okay, here's a bigger picture of the same thing. So we've got England here, Ireland here, and here we have Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, and then you go further to the northern Europe, and here's Denmark. Denmark is this peninsula plus some islands next to it. So that is Denmark. And here we have today's Sweden and today's Norway. You'll be reading about Vikings, the Icelandic sagas, and Norway is the place where they left before they went to Iceland. And the Vikings lived all around here in these areas. They were Scandinavians. Often Vikings referred to as Danes, only Danes, but same thing, or Norsemen. So different names for them. But here is today's Sweden. And of course, it didn't exist as a state. It was not a nation state. But Beowulf poem, it talks about Swedes, and it talks about Geats or Geats. Pronunciations vary there. So Geats, and Beowulf was a Geat or Geat. And then he went to help the Danes here. So we've got the southern parts of Sweden, and last time I mentioned Gothenburg, which is Göteborg in Swedish. So you have the Göt there. That's the same as Geet, the same morpheme. The name of the city is based on the tribe that Beowulf belonged to. So if you look at Sweden here, and you look at this Denmark is here, and these different islands as part of it, and this is the place Lejre. It's a relatively small place in Denmark. Copenhagen is here, the capital of Denmark. And it's just a little bit west from Copenhagen. You could go there by a taxi and not have to, pay too much, or take a train, 20, 30 minutes. I haven't been there, so I don't know exactly how long it takes from Copenhagen, but it's not far at all. Everything is pretty much close by. And just so that you kind of have an idea of where these things happen, Beowulf comes from what is now southern Sweden, and you can see here how small the crossing of the water is, and even if you cross it from here, it's not far. The trip that Beowulf and his men took, it was not a huge long trip like what the Vikings they did. Those two, they went from Norway to Iceland, from Iceland to Greenland, from Greenland to the Americas, and then they went all over as well. So all over the world, just sailing. So this was a tiny trip for Beowulf to take. He came somewhere from here across the river, the sea, came here, and that's Lejre, where they claim that Heorot Hall would have been, based on archaeological and historical evidence. Okay, so before we start to talk about the readings, I will post this as well. So here's a little bit of an explanation of the graphics of the Beowulf manuscript, which was there further up the burned page. And then this is a voluntary exercise. You don't need to do it. You can if you are into this kind of thing. So here's how you can try to figure out from that burned page, which this one. So if you like that kind of decoding stuff, you can try to do this, but it's not a must. And here's the exercise itself, where you can see the Old English on line, first line, and then the next line is the words transcribed. And here are just the words transcribed, and then if you want to try to keep the Old English available and try to figure out what words these stand for. The lines have been given, so it's the right side of folio 190 in the manuscript. Of course, it's lines 2757, a few lines forward. So just for your entertainment, if you don't have anything else to do, but it's not an obligation. All right.
There are those who will say, he is a giant of men, possessing the strength of 10 and the speed of 100. This is the story of Beowulf.
Whose soldiers are you? It is very brazen of you indeed to conquer in broad daylight.
This is the audience of King Rodkar.
To see him, you must first get past me.
Your fame and adventures precede you. Your glory is becoming legend. But now you're going to fight Grendel.
Fire!
A scourge is before us.
Sailors bring tales of men being slaughtered.
What is your plan, Beowulf?
Tonight, these halls will run not the blood of Danes, the blood of Grendel.
Okay. That was just the trailer for the movie Grendel. From, I believe it came out in 2007. Has anyone seen it?
You see,
No? Okay. Well, the point here is not to promote that kind of approach to great poetry, but it's not necessarily all bad. So it might be an interesting thing to look at. Get this. There. Okay. Now we get some light, if you don't mind turning up the light. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. So just like a minute-long trailer. It does give the atmosphere of what may have gone on, but obviously Hollywoodized, if that's the word. Last time we got to the point where Beowulf had, with his men, he had already come to, cross that water, cross the sea, and had arrived in Heorot Hall. They had first been met with the immigration official and customs officer in one body, Rodkar's guard there on the seashore, watching who is coming here, because very often they were enemies who came there. And of course his first assumption was that these are enemies who are coming in because they have all these arms with them, spears, and they are in their fighting gear. So they must have looked formidable. And if you think about those helmets, they did look formidable, probably even to another soldier like Rodkar's guard there. So they're questioned, who are you? They pass that initial gatekeeping incident. They are let in, and the guard takes them to King Rodkar, and Rodkar agrees to meet them, investigates them, finds out this is Beowulf, and Beowulf's father, Edgefield, had been Rodkar's buddy. So in that world, as you could see, it's not geographically that far away, and people moved from one place to another, and yet if they had made friends with somebody a long time ago, those relationships, they tended to last. So Rodkar kind of started from a position of respecting Beowulf just because he was his father's Echteo's son, and that helped to Rodkar to believe that he needs to let this person in and accept his offer of help. And like in that little trailer, they mentioned people are dying here because of a monster. I came to help, and that's what he's doing. So he was called to duty by the news that he heard when he was in his homeland first with other Geats or Yeats, and he comes to help. Keeping in mind that this is a Christian poet writing, albeit about pagan times, a couple centuries prior to the writing. If we say it was written about 700, 750, maybe a little bit later, the historical evidence places some of these people around 500s. So that's the time. It's clearly pagan times still. To England, the Christianity came in 597. And that changed the English population. They were converted, or it's not necessarily that they had like this conversion experience, that they regretted their sins and so-called came to Jesus. But it was just like, okay, everybody gets vaccinated now. Okay, everybody gets baptized now. Pretty much the same kind of a situation. And people converted, and then they started following these traditions, and they were kind of like eased into England. But so the writing happens in England, but the happenings happen in Northern Europe, and this is a Christian poet writing, and when you think of what Beowulf does, he sees that there's need for his help, and later on even we can see some parallels. So what is the biblical figure that we could kind of like think that maybe in the mind of the poet he wants to sell Beowulf as parallel to this biblical figure? Or God's Son, Jesus, no less than Jesus. So it has some of, I don't want to say that Jesus had supernatural powers, but some of the parables certainly show that he may have been doing things that ordinary people couldn't, and so is Beowulf. So very different, obviously, because Beowulf comes to, uses a military approach to problems, and Jesus' approach was different. And I don't know how heretical this kind of an interpretation might be, but I invite you to kind of like try to think of parallels to something else, some other stories when you read these stories, that there may be some parallels. And it helps to kind of understand that, wow, Beowulf is a very significant figure, because you can even just kind of like play with this idea that some same features as, Jesus came to help, to rescue, and that was Beowulf too. Okay, so just keep that at the back of your mind. And so they come there, and what do they do the first night? What does Beowulf do? They know that Grendel's going to be coming that night because he's come every night. Past 12 years he's been coming and killing soldiers there. Most people don't sleep there anymore. So what did Beowulf do? And his men? They have had a long day. They came across the sea.
Well, there's a feast and they go to sleep.
They go to sleep. Yes, they just go. They sleep there on the benches in the mead hall in Heorot hall, and they go to sleep. Yes. Beowulf is. I mean, everybody else goes to sleep, but we don't think that Beowulf was really sleeping. He was resting, but not necessarily sleeping, because he knew that he needs to have a fight if Grendel comes. And now, who is Grendel? Is an interesting creature. Has a biblical connection as well. So he is a representative of Cain's ancestors. And remember the story of Cain and Abel? Abel. There. Whose sons were they?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Whose sons were Cain and Abel?
I don't know the background.
I don't remember. They were the first sons ever born, and then one killed the other one.
Exactly, yes. So Cain is the one who killed Abel. And they were Adam and Eve's sons. So, yeah, it's not that far from God. So, the mother was Eve and father was Adam. And, of course, what happened with Adam and Eve, they lived in paradise, then they... What did they do? They
ate the fruit from the forbidden tree.
Exactly. Yes, they ate from the tree from which the tree of knowledge and good knowledge and evil knowledge, and that was the only tree that they were not supposed to be eating from. And the serpent, who was of course Satan, just in the guise of a serpent, comes to Eve and says, "Oh, you can eat this delicious apple," and Eve takes a bite, but not only does she take a bite, she takes it also to Adam, who also takes a bite. So now we have, both of them have eaten from the tree they were not supposed to be eating from, and that's the cause of all the trouble that followed. And God said, "Okay, you need to leave. You need to leave this place because you broke the rule, the only rule that there was," and that's been chaotic ever since. This is the biblical story. Obviously, we call it a legend and so on. But the sons of Adam and Eve were Cain and Abel. And do you remember what caused Cain to kill Abel?
He was inheriting more land, or he wanted his land, or is that it? Or is that a different story?
Well, I don't know. I'm not
I want to say it was over land or something.
It was a similar
like
kind.
inheritance.
A similar kind of thing. Cain became jealous of Abel because they both gave offerings to God, and a cultural habit, and Abel's offering was better than Cain's, and Cain became jealous. And of course, jealousy is something that was introduced after the world got fallen or fell because of the original sin. So jealousy is a bad feeling, and of course murdering is bad. So Cain committed a horrible sin, killing his brother, fratricide, committed fratricide, and because of jealousy, because of comparing his offering to Abel's offering, and here we are. But the legend goes that that out of Cain's line then came the trolls and the monsters and the giants. So they were like human, but there was this sinister connotation with these creatures. And in the Beowulf poem, the poet picks up, or the legend, whatever the poem is based on, it picks up this connection to the Bible, that Grendel was one of Cain's descendants. Next time I'm going to show you other PowerPoint. I might post it already after this class. Different depictions of what Grendel could look like. I want you to do the reading of Grendel so that you in your own mind create your own picture of Grendel, how he looked like. There is this have you read the Frankenstein book? Yes. There is a similar kind of a thing, that this is a lonely, very ugly, very huge creature. But the loneliness there's that loneliness that somehow comes clear also here in the depiction of Grendel. He had demons as his friends. But what he has to do is every evening, when Rodkar and his men are in this beautiful, huge, fancy, warm place called Heorot Hall, they are there. They are feasting. They are singing. They are having a good time. He's outside, and he's always like looking inside of what is going on in this wonderful place, and he, like his ancestor Cain, is consumed by that jealousy, which then leads to his wrath, and he wants to go in a little bit of the same way. There are these intertextual references from one great story to another. And Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, certainly knew about Beowulf. So a person becomes bad because of maybe jealousy, maybe loneliness, combination of all these things. Grendel, however, has a mother, and we'll get to know her a little bit better in our next readings. Okay, so if you look at if you go back to page 9, where we kind of left last time, and the two last lines there. So after nightfall, Grendel set out to the lofty house to see how the ring-danes, again here's another nice compound word, ring-danes, Danes who have rings, who give rings as gifts, how the ring-danes were settling into it after their drink, and there he came upon them, a company of the best asleep from their feasting, insensible to pain and human sorrow. Suddenly then the god-cursed brute was creating havoc. Greedy and grim, he grabbed 30 men from their resting places and rushed to his lair, flushed up and inflamed from the raid, blundering back with the butchered corpses. So this is what he had been doing every night, and this had lasted for 12 years. And it got to the point that the men, the thanes, the soldiers, the retainers of King Rodkar, they didn't want to sleep in the Heorot hall anymore, and I don't blame them. So we have this beautiful, wonderful place, which would be extremely functional, but you could only use it during the daytime, because when night came, you had to go away. It was like a dormitory in a way, that you first, you have your supper there, you have your drinks, you have your conversations, the songs, the entertainment, and then the men slept there as well, but they didn't want to sleep there anymore. And that's not their fault. So what happens, because this goes on for 12 years, the Danes then, they're desperate. Obviously they are desperate. And they turn to get help, try to get help even from heathen gods. And this is a little bit of the poet's insertion there about how desperation may lead to those kinds of, people to turn to those kinds of sources of help. And then we have Beowulf, who hears of Grendel, and he takes his men there, and so he's referred to with various names. Look and pay some attention to what different names, what kinds of different phrases are used for Beowulf, like the Geat, hero, the hero of the Geats, and Edgetheow's son, and so on. So we have the Coast Guard incidents moving along. They arrive at Heorot, and then Beowulf announces his name. So we get to page 25 in the story, to line 344, and then he says, "We are retainers from Heorot's band." Heorot was there in the Geatland, and he was Beowulf's king. "Beowulf is my name. If your lord and master, the most renowned son of Halfdane, will hear me out and graciously allow me to greet him in person, I am ready and willing to report my errand." And he then reports his errand. He's accepted, like we already mentioned. So Beowulf enters Heorot. This is on page 29. And he declares that he wants to fight Grendel. So Rodkar remembers his father, Edgetheow. They were good friends, like was already mentioned. All through this narrative, there are constant, frequent references to religion, that God-given rights and so on. And then on page 35, we are introduced to Unferth. Always they mention whose sons, most of the time they mention whose sons they are. So Unferth, a son of Ecglaf, and he is, from the very beginning, mentioned as someone who was sick with envy. So we have this evil feeling, emotion, envy, which doesn't necessarily bring good things. So Unferth is pretty much the only one, one of those people in Heorot Hall who is kind of like lifted up as and we've given a little bit more information about him, and so he is sick of envy, envious of Beowulf. So Beowulf's coming, this is page 35, line 501. Beowulf's coming, his sea braiding made him sick with envy. He could not brook or abide the fact that anyone else alive under heaven might enjoy greater regard than he did. And he starts remembering, giving his own version of Beowulf, because Beowulf had already earned a reputation as a fierce warrior, and so what we have here is this jealous, envious person, Unferth, who gives an account of one of the ways that Beowulf had gotten his, earned his reputation. And he had killed a whole bunch of sea monsters because he and his buddy Brekka, whose name means storm, so they had taken up this competition. They were like daring each other, risking the water just to prove that you could win. And they had done this long, it sounds like a fairy tale, and it may be a fairy tale. So they were swimming from the side of Sweden to the side of the, across the what is called the East Sea there, Ostrobotnian Gulf of Ostrobothnia, between Sweden and Finland. And they mention, of course, I'm always like, oh, they mention Finns already in Beowulf. So Beowulf had swam. It takes, on a ferry, it takes several hours. So he had swam that several day trip just by swimming with his sword and killed all the sea monsters. So he had cleared the sea so that it was a friendlier place now for all the seafarers to go. Now Beowulf listens to Unferth's account of this particular incident where he and Brekka, they were, kind of like engaging in this competition, in this boyish, young manish competition, and Beowulf won, but he wants to correct Unferth, and this starts from page 37, where he says, "Well, friend Unferth, you have had your say about Brekka and me, but it was mostly beer that was doing the talking." So he points out that Unferth is this, braggart, and kind of like, gives his own version about what happened. And he then kind of like presents his resume in a way. He says, I've done this and I've done this and I won these sea monsters. And yet you kind of get an idea that he's boasting, but at the same time, if that was true, is it boasting if you've done some huge heroic deeds and then you talk about it if you don't talk about them constantly? But here we have Unferth, who tried to misrepresent Beowulf. So Beowulf stands his ground and he corrects him and tells what the story is, or what had actually happened. So on page 41 we get introduced to Beowulf, the wife of King Rodkar, and she's one of the very few women who actually has a name. And the name means, as we pointed out, a slave servant, which was the unfortunate custom of that world. Warriors went to wars, and they often brought young girls, with them as slaves. They lost their freedom and sometimes very often they married them also, and this seems to be a happy marriage, badly as it may have started, with Beowulf brought there probably against her own will, but there's not much romanticism going on in Beowulf. There's not like, there's no love stories there. But it seems that Rodkar's, the king's, and Beowulf's relationship was really good. And Beowulf was respected as a woman, and she served, drinks in Heorot hall. And then when they had the meals and drinks and entertainment, Rodkar and they go to sleep, and the poet makes a point that they go to the same bed. So this is as close as, we have a lot of violence, but there's extremely little sex. And this is not sex either, but they at least are they are mentioned as, that was an amicable couple. So what happens then, as we already pointed out, the warriors, they go to sleep. Beowulf rests, but is ready to greet the monster. And Beowulf has heard that the monster is either primitive or thinks he's so strong he doesn't need any tools, any arms, any weapons in his fights, and he has managed that way pretty well, because he has just come there and he's just picked up these soldiers and eaten them, hair and feet and hands and everything, and it's worked for him without any weapons. And this is what Beowulf has also heard, that Grendel doesn't use weapons. He doesn't have a sword. He doesn't use helmets or anything. And what does Beowulf do? He wants to have a fair fight with this monster who has been killing people for past 12 years. And he says, I'm not going to be using any sword either. And as it turns out, his sword wouldn't probably have done any good, because the other men, Beowulf's men, they try to kill Grendel with their swords, but they don't work. A sword cannot penetrate him. He is a magical creature, and Beowulf's decision to fight him without any weapons was probably, okay. Beowulf is extremely strong. Somewhere there's this mention that in his hands he has the strength of 30 men or something like that. And yes, he is so strong that he becomes the first one to be able to defeat Grendel. But he doesn't kill Grendel. What does he do to Grendel? What happens in the fight?
He tears off his shoulder.
Yes. So he tears up so there's this great fight scene depiction where Beowulf is holding Grendel's hand and holding it so strongly that Grendel has never experienced anything like that before in his life, and he rips off his shoulder, and that's that's pretty gruesome, but Grendel escapes. My husband tells me, incidentally, he's teaching another version of Beowulf in another class at the same time, so we have our fun preparing for this class every evening. Our mutual classes. He's going to move into different directions. He's not going to do other Nordic myths, but he's starting with Beowulf in his section of this class. But anyway, he was telling me when we were, preparing last night, he said that he used to read to his daughter, who's my stepdaughter, when Elizabeth was 3 years old, and Elizabeth really loved the story of Beowulf, and especially she loved the place where Grendel tears off, where Beowulf tears off Grendel's arm. So she liked the goriest point of the story. She had been like, "Dad, read it again, read it again, read it again." So that happens. So Grendel loses his arm, but he escapes. There's this description of how he realizes that he's not going to win over Beowulf. So he wants to go back to his lair, to his mama. That's not mentioned yet. We haven't been introduced to Beowulf's mother yet, but we will. And so he wants to leave, he wants to escape. He is in horrible pain and he leaves. We can kind of just imagine how he leaves, and he's just, gushing blood, and of course he's going to die. No ER room available there in that world. And what is left behind in Heorot Hall is his arm and talons, the claws. So he is described as something between a human and an animal, and non-human animal. When you read this, try to think about what kind of picture do you get of Beowulf, and then check out, or I'll show you next time, or I'll post this. I made a tiny collection of different depictions by different artists at different time of how Grendel could have looked like. And there are some I just don't like this. This is like a modern day superhero. All we are missing is some kind of a Superman S here or something on his shirt. So there are very different depictions. He looks pretty formidable. But one of those pictures shows him walking on the marshes, and he's a person of the marshes. He lives at the bottom of the sea in a lair like animals, and there's this one picture. You'll notice it when you look over it. It has this very sad look. He's huge. He's ugly. He is scary looking. But there's this sad loneliness in the depiction of that one particular artistic rendition of him. So what we have is Grendel has been dead. Now is this like Quartertil? Quartertil 2 is going to be the end of this class, right? Okay, so we'll finish soon. I'll just point out this particular thing. There's this celebration. There are the gifts that you give to the soldiers. These are not mercenaries. They are given gifts, but they don't have like a regular salary. Obviously, they are doing a deed and they get rewarded by that. So Beowulf gets these wonderful gifts, and they are described in detail. Beowulf's men also get their rewards because Rodkar is a fair person. He's a ring giver, and that's a positive thing in that culture. If somebody helps you out, you give them, you compensate for their help. In that feast, when they are celebrating the death, because they know that Grendel must have died out of that horrible wound, they celebrate Beowulf, and there's program in that celebration. And this is something that, when you read this, you may think, what in the world is the significance of this particular story? There are what they refer to as minstrel singers. They have these entertainers. They read poems. They sing songs, and it's not unlike. I mean, we have this kind of tradition still going on. I was just kind of like reminded of poems being read, songs being sung in celebration. And if anyone watched the inauguration yesterday, part of that inauguration was that you bring in a young poet who recites a poem that she wrote, or you bring in a singer who sings a song that everybody already knows. So this is not such a weird thing. We do it still. And so there we have these stories being told, but think about them as having some kind of a meaning, that there's a parallel to like one story, for instance, in this celebration is telling a story of a bad king, and that bad king is compared to Beowulf, who could be a good king, as what he turns out to be. I think this is enough of gore and glory for one lecture, and keep reading, try to keep up with the syllabus. It is not that much reading, but you probably want to set aside an hour or two every day to get forward with the story. So we'll be continuing the adventures, and you have a very good rest of the week and a good weekend. Bye-bye.